Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. And another heavyweight news and notes mashup video today, starting with the potential unretirement of Tyson Fury. So much so the comments have been bandied around by Fury and also his promoter Frank Warren that they've even issued a press release about some of Fury's statements about teasing coming back, and that's the title of the press release, as you can see here on screen. Tyson teases retirement U-turn. So there is an interview that they've done for their own Queensbury channel, etc. But what we're going to do is just get to some of those quotes and then a few thoughts. Entirely predictable. So you've got Frank Warren saying, we're talking about various scenarios. Something will come out of it. We could announce fairly soon. Fury himself says, Frank, show me the money. The magic man will show me the money and we'll make something big happen. So this is entirely predictable, and the interview goes on to mention Joshua, mention Usyk, all that sort of stuff. You can check that out at your leisure. Tyson Fury, until he dropped the WBC title, I don't think the majority of boxing fans really believe the so-called I'm done, I'm never coming back to the sport, especially with the lure of undisputed so close. There were a few poor deluded souls who were, coming to the channel and other places as well, bashing people for saying they didn't believe that Fury wasn't genuine with the retirement talk. Most people knew Tyson Fury blows like the wind and he can change direction any day on any manner of things. Sometimes one day he'll say one thing, the next it's different. Not surprising here, but it's good for the sport if he stays in the sport. The heavyweight division right now needs Tyson Fury, needs big characters like him, because for the most part, recently, especially in this pandemic era of heavyweight boxing, it's been pretty sedate. Hasn't been as many big fights as we would have hoped for or liked. And, the biggest and sort of most high-profile fight of 2022 to date was Fury versus White. And that's already in the rear view almost a couple of months. We haven't had an action-packed calendar. That's been few and far between, unfortunately. So if Fury stays, I'm all for that. I just think the whole talk about him retiring, it just seems so overplayed and like he being told to believe something we just knew was an absolute lie for the most part. Fury will be coming back, undoubtedly. That was never in question. So this section of the video I've spliced into this video. I had recorded it, I'd half edited it, and then got to the Justice Hughie card, him and Joe Guido. That's another video of its own. And this news from Tyson Fury, the statement, was put out on Twitter.
Just a quick message to let everybody know that I, the Gypsy King, am happily retired. But to get me out of retirement, considering I don't need the money and I don't need the aggravation, it's going to cost these people $500 million.
And also some other news that broke while I was watching Justice Hughie and Joe Guido was that Hughie Fury, Tyson Fury's cousin, and Michael Hunter has been postponed. So they say that Hughie Fury has an illness and that they wish Hughie a speedy recovery on the road to the WBA final eliminator. So the winner apparently is going to be fighting Daniel Dubois, but obviously postponed for now. And Michael Hunter has weighed in here. So this is literally, I've just come onto Twitter again just to check out, and he's put something up here. He says, we were prepared for this illness, and that illness is in inverted commas. So obviously he's questioning the veracity of the postponement. What happens now for July the 2nd is that still going to be a main event with Michael Hunter in it with a late notice opponent. Unclear. I'm sure he will want some activity. Maybe he will just have to sit and wait. We shall see. Meanwhile, Anthony Joshua has announced a deal with DAZN. So this is a day or two old at the time that I'm recording this video, but I wanted to mark it. So Joshua going to DAZN, not a huge shock, especially with his promoter Eddie Hearn having, joined DAZN full time. He's been there for the best part of what is it, a year now, whatever it is, Joshua was the one fighter that was outside of that deal. So there was the talk he would stay with Sky, but the synergies with Joshua being promoted by Matchroom and Matchroom being full-time with DAZN, it always seemed that it was a bit odd that he wouldn't be there, but eventually it would have just come down to money. So there's been all sorts of talk about what this deal includes and how much it'll be worth per annum, all that sort of stuff, but bet your bottom dollar it's lucrative. And for DAZN, they need to spend big to try and get some big names in the UK to be on their platform. But I guess the questions are, they're not necessarily in that sort of cut through with casuals as I understand it. Sky with their platform, and they have all these other sports and all these channels that they can sort of direct people to boxing and advertise fights and that sort of stuff. It's not the same for DAZN. Generally, you go in there because you're a boxing fan. So I wonder if there's a bit of drop-off. I think we have seen maybe some cards, maybe there's not as much buzz about them as there had been in the past when they're on Sky. Joshua is just a popular fighter though, so even if there's a drop in popularity to some extent, he's still going to pull people in. And I think that's even the case, even if he loses to Usyk next time out. But I think for DAZN and their hopes and the stock and the future of them, they'll be all in for Joshua to win that fight, because that will really help not just Joshua in his career, but DAZN's fortunes as well. And a couple of comments here from Joshua, just quoting from Boxing Scene. I've been working with DAZN and following its progress for a long time. We've enjoyed a really successful partnership in the US for many years, and I know the team understand the passion and the drive of the business. DAZN's vision and passion is to innovate is what attracted me to the partnership. They're leading the digital landscape in sport and the future of sports broadcasting. I'm really looking forward to a long and successful partnership. How long that's going to be is anyone's guess. If Joshua takes a couple of losses in the next year or two, who knows, he might be out of the sport within a couple of years. But if he can beat Usyk, well then maybe that will revitalise whatever the next part of his career is going to be. So many ifs, buts and maybes when it comes to Anthony Joshua. Eddie Hearn, meanwhile, has spoken of the deal, saying, "We have a shared vision with DAZN to make it unrivaled home of boxing for fans across the world. Now with Anthony Joshua joining the team, the stage is set to do even more together, and we're looking forward to getting started." Not sure how much more they can really do. Joshua fights once or twice a year max at this point. So 2 fights a year is probably as best as you can expect it to be. Sticking with Eddie Hearn, he says that he's touched down in Australia as we look to finalise our first card here in September. And that got me thinking about, well, what's it going to be? And he was pictured on social media with Sky Nicholson and someone else I wasn't paying too much attention. But it made me think of, well, they've had Dempsey McKean in the UK build his profile a little bit. He's had a few soft lobs. Surely he will be on that card in September, and hopefully against someone good. Someone further down had in the sort of the comments had mentioned maybe Lucas Brown. Maybe that's a potential opponent or a potential fighter for the card. McKean and Brown, that's almost been made before. I don't mind it at this point, and if they're really trying to build McKean, they've got to start to put him in some halfway decent fights as well. Daniel Dubois, back in the UK, has a press release issued by Frank Warren's Queensbury. So we'll get to the comments. So that's pretty slick there with the waistcoat in the picture. But he says, "I heard a lot of people say it, and even though I thought it was a foregone conclusion I would win the fight, that fight was very big. It has set up a whole load of other matches down the line that are going to happen." I just jump in there. I'm not sure how big the fight was. It was Trevor Bryan. Seemed to be fought in front of a few hundred people in a pretty under-promoted event. How big it was is that, I guess that's subjective. But he continues, "This is what we're in the sport for. Along with my dad and everyone who has been behind me from the beginning, this is what I've been pushing for. Now it is ahead of me. These big challenges are going to come." Well, I guess the thing with that fight, it's a rebuild fight after his loss to Joyce. It's a good learning and development fight. It's a step up from where he had been. And it is one of those sort of seasoning fights that he did need. And he's right. It is going to help set up something for the future. I still think Daniel Dubois will be probably matched relatively conservatively by Frank Warren just for the next year or two, bearing in mind 24 years old, new trainer in Shane McGuigan, still probably developing and not really probably in his prime years at this point, and there's still room to grow. But, you know, he's right. It will sort of set the stage for bigger things to come at some point. And of course, he says he's ready for the winner of Joshua and Usyk. That seems to be a common theme with pretty much most heavyweights. The sort of forgotten heavyweight in the Frank Warren stable, Joyce, he's saying on social media, opponent locked in for July 2nd at the OVO Arena. News coming very soon. So I've heard some different names sort of thrown around, Christian Hammer being one. I mean, who knows who it's going to be. It's not going to be anyone that's going to sort of push him or test him. It'll be some activity and no more. And Otto Wallin, he is calling out Deontay Wilder again via his promoter. Dimitri Salita says Deontay Wilder is the perfect opponent for Otto Wallin because Otto gave Tyson Fury the toughest fight of his career. Oh, come on, man. So he says that is a fact. Deontay Wilder had a memorable trilogy with Tyson Fury. He lost twice and drew, and if Wilder wants to prove that he's truly on his way back to stardom, there's no better version for him to fight with to prove he's serious about being back on top than Otto. Just kind of feels like at this point with Otto Wallin, with the sort of, they haven't been able to capitalize on that Fury performance where he came better than advertised, cut Fury. It was a more sort of tough fight than many expected, but he still lost. And it kind of feels like they've never capitalized on it. And this sort of statement is like Salita basically panhandling for spare change on Otto Wallin's behalf, you know, begging for it. It's probably unlikely at this. Deontay Wilder is going to come for his return fight after a couple of knockout losses against a relatively skilled southpaw. Come on. It's just not realistic. Moving on. So you've got three heavyweights that are on the Joet Gonzalez versus Isaac Dogbo card. So we'll just get down to it. Quite a lengthy press release. So you can see here you've got Guido Vianello. He is returning in an 8-rounder. You've got the 6'9" Antonio Mireles. He is in a 4-rounder against Minneapolis resident Danny Reyes. And then further down it confirms that heavyweight Colton Warner, who's currently 4-1. And there's also a further fight, actually, an all-Minnesota heavyweight showdown scheduled for 4 rounds. Cayman Audi versus Tommy Martian. Probably butchered that name, but Mireles on social media says back to business, July 23, it's about to be 4-0. And Guido Vianello, he says the news is out. I return to the ring July 23rd in Minnesota at the Grand Casino Hinckley on a good card live on ESPN. I can't wait to show you all the new and improved Gladiator. And it will be interesting with Vianello because some people were tipping him to go far in the heavyweight division, and he's been a little bit shaky. I've still got question marks about him. I had question marks about him heading into his fight with Kingsley eBay, where he escaped with a draw, but arguably he'd lost that fight. Has he improved? He's obviously dropped his then trainer, Kevin Barry. He's gone back to his original Italian trainer. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the return of Guido Vianello. And just a couple of fight results from recent days. So Jeremiah Milton, he's notched another win. And actually, we'll just pull up the little clip that he posted to his social media. Obviously, his opponents just beat the count here. So this is from some action from the weekend, and you can see that. We'll move on to, I don't want to get copyrighted. So Milton now 5-0. Raphael Akpejiori, he was facing Terrell Woods. He's got a win, so that went some rounds, and he had been knocking all sorts of guys out early, so probably some good activity for him. Maybe a little bit lower in terms of, just sort of seems to bottomed out with some of the opponents in recent times. Now 14-0, but I guess given he's only had, 20 rounds or so in 14 fights, does need some seasoning and some more durable opponents. So Wood's not a bad shout. And just rounding out this heavyweight news and notes mashup video, another result, Jeamie from the weekend, British prospect. He advanced 2-0 with her first round stoppage. That was against a guy, Jake Darnell. What do you make of it all? drop a comment loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.